Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, what is true influence and how can you increase yours? So here are three very popular topics that I don't really think many people are driven by. Sell, control, lead. My experience, however, is we all desperately want the ability to positively influence other people. We have people we care about. We have a world we care about, issues we care about, ideas and solutions we care about for addressing the problems in the world, the pain, the suffering. We want to be able to impart value to others, and we think we've got some good ideas, good thoughts. Well, this is the concept of influence. The definition of influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something. So a few years ago, I sat down with Zoe Chance to discuss what influence really is and how to increase our personal influence. Zoe teaches the most popular class at the Yale School of Management. It's titled Mastering Influence and Persuasion. Her research on behavioral economics, neuroscience, and psychology has been published in top academic journals and covered by the Harvard Business Review, the Economist, BBC, Time, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. Zoe has a TEDx talk, How to Make a Behavior Addictive. It's got more than 700,000 views on it. And before coming to Yale, she earned a doctorate in marketing at Harvard and managed a $200 million dollar segment of the Barbie brand at Mattel. Well, from Zoe's Yale course, that's a super popular course, she wrote a book. Again, the course is called Mastering Influence and Persuasion. The book, however, is called Influence Is Your Superpower, the science of winning hearts, sparking change, and making good things happen. So following is my discussion with Zoe about what influence is and what it is not, which is just as important, and how to deftly wield influence in your life so you can have the positive impact on the world that you desire. So you can find her book, Influence is Your Superpower, anywhere, of course, and you can connect with Zoe at zoechance.com. All right, well, that's what's coming up next, my discussion with Zoe Chance, and really getting to the heart, I think, of influence, which, again, I think that's what we want most, more than selling or control or leadership, which is so popular. Let's evolve ourselves today. Zoe, I was just looking through the book again, sitting at home. A couple of my kids came around and I told one of my sons, he's 17, he's in high school. And I read the part to him where you were talking about pronouns, about when we start using these I, me, my, that it's not necessarily a narcissistic, selfish aspect, but a sign of insecurity. And it just caught his attention. And he said it reminds him of how to win friends and influence people. And Zoe, he went off on, I literally had to get out the door. So dude, let's talk about it tomorrow. Because he's so excited. He's 17 years old. He's a junior in high school and he has been exposed to this. And he says, Dad, it's amazing. He says the amount of friends, and my word, fruition, but he's really just reveling in that right now. The amount of friends and, call it popularity or just interest, but he knows how to be, as you said, interested in other people. And of course, that makes him interesting. It was so much, I thought maybe we'll follow up the show with you and talk with him and get it from his perspective. But we're at a point right now where culturally, his culture especially, is not versed in this at all, which is why we need your book.
So they are versed in influencing each other. It's just differently from the way that we've all been doing it, right?
Okay,
they are actually bringing friends together in mass movements in a way that we haven't seen, at least since this small sliver of generation in the 60s, right? When our parents were doing this. But they're my daughter is 13 and she and her friends are influencing each other through memes on text chat. I don't know how any of that works.
Okay.
It's another type of influence.
And right? I was going to ask that question because I grew up on that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is the Ziglar show. We talk about it a lot. He wrote that in 1936. So I would pose to you that I assume that the tenets of what creates influence, maybe they haven't changed at the core level, but the methodologies do. And you just mentioned social media. I mean, how are we doing that? Where are the areas where that's happening, where we need to take advantage of that wasn't happening back? At least I'm old enough to remember when we did not have social media or the internet and those types of things. And it's changed. The landscape's just changed so much.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, I write and teach and research about interpersonal influence.
Yeah.
So social media influence is just not my domain of expertise. So, we can talk about it, but there are a million people who are better than I am at influence on social media. But since we're talking about it, one of the things that people tend to neglect or misunderstand is that it is so hard to get somebody to take action just by you posting something on social media. Yeah. And the way that we get each other to take action tends to be through individual outreach and individual conversations. And a lot of leaders that I talk to in the business world and nonprofits tell me that they didn't understand how important those individual conversations were until they had already risen relatively high in this hierarchy. But the Dale Carnegie book that you mentioned, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I love this book. And you were also saying, are these general psychological tenets still applying? And what I'll say is, I think that book is chock full of great advice, and it's very simple, and we didn't know what the science was.
Yeah.
And at that time, right? So if somebody just goes and applies these principles, they can still do well. And that's incredible that this book was written so long ago. When I was selling my book proposal in 2018, Audible told me that book, Dale Carnegie's book, was the #1 book bringing new readers to their platform still, which is so crazy.
It is crazy. I don't quite understand that. As much as I love the book, but I don't understand. But it's well, again, we needed, that's why I was interested in yours, a new perspective at it. Yeah.
And another thing about this book and some of the earlier work on influence is that it came from the perspective of this guy who sounds like a wonderful guy, and he's this white dude doing business with other white dudes in an environment where power structure, hierarchy, diversity of gender, race, cultural backgrounds, things like that, just weren't coming into play. It's not that he was doing something wrong. He was just writing about his world.
Right.
And the world that we live in now is, to my mind, fortunately, a lot more complicated than that.
Well, it is. So let's break down influence. I mean, that's the title of the book. Influence is your superpower. And as I read the book and I'm thinking about these concepts, I'm to some degree thinking, is it even our only power? At least from I refer to this audience as an aspiring audience. They're not off listening to NPR's latest crime drama and being entertained. They're here to learn something, to grow. So an aspiring audience. And in that effort to have purpose, to serve people, and I realized there's so many people that have such great things to offer. And I've been in this position and, will always continue to be to some degree, has something great to offer. You could help somebody, and yet you don't have any influence. And that's heartbreaking when we know, I know something, I've experienced something that I could offer this person that would help them, or maybe even flat out change their life, save their life. And yet, if I don't have influence, which we so often run into, which is why you have the book, we're powerless. That's a really impotent feeling.
There's also the reality, though, Kevin, that most people don't want our advice. And most people, even who seek our advice, are not going to take action on our advice. And I'm somebody who is, my big personal development thing that I'm working on right now, ironically, is giving less advice. Because I find that, and from being a coach, I'm sure that you're much better at this than I am, that when other people are giving themselves advice rather than me giving them the advice, and I'm the sounding board and I'm the listener, and I can give them, little tidbits on the margin, that's going to be more helpful for them. When there's somebody who's living their life that I know they're making a terrible decision and I know what they can be doing better, they really don't want to hear from me. And I, like people in my family, for example, I don't know if you've had this, but people in my family that I desperately want to tell them what to do. And many times I have.
Yeah.
And that is just not helpful. So the book that I'm writing comes from the perspective of nobody wants to be told what to do. So how can we be more influential without being that person who's telling everybody what to do?
Okay, well, you bring up another point that I pulled out of your book, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that we have this, that we as people also have a set point of pushback against making a decision. You said it well, but we have that, we're here trying to have influence to help somebody move a general direction, go make a decision, do something. And we're in a place right now, I've referred to it lately as just decision fatigue. And I find myself there, and I'm looking at the next offer on something that I may even want. And I really would just rather not, because as you said, if I go forward, I got to hassle with, your word was considering it. I'd rather just not. And you talked about coaching. So we got a lot of coaches and consultants in the audience. And that's one where often we're not competing against the person making a decision to go with someone else. We're competing against a decision for them not to make a decision and just not do it, because it's not often critical or acute. And so we're almost, in that sense, to what you said, then we're almost coming with, one, they don't want to be told what to do, and they'd really just rather not have to make a decision anyway. So here we're coming as an influencer, and you got 2 strikes against you. Is that fair?
At least two.
At least 2. Okay.
Every time you're trying to influence someone to do something, you're a threat. And the way that their whole brain is designed is to have its number one priority be threat detection and response. Okay. So you're trying to influence someone and you're asking for their attention or their time, maybe their money, maybe their social capital, whatever it is that in your mind, maybe what you have to offer is so much more valuable. And so you feel great about like, hey, I have this great opportunity. It's going to change your life. It's going to be amazing. But what they're focused on is what they're going to have to give up because you're a threat. And that's what we focus on first.
In this, again, I'm going to come back to the high level of influence. I like looking up words. I'm a wordy in that sense. And the first one you get when you put it into Google is the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something. And you hit this pretty quick, it might even be in the intro to the book, about how we can often have this adverse feeling towards influence because we associate manipulation in there. And I have a lot of kids and I'm thinking about them. And sometimes I am absolutely trying to manipulate them, but it's for their own good. I'm trying to get them to eat their vegetables. It's for their good. I don't get any points in heaven or in the parenting council for getting them to eat their vegetables.
You do.
Do I? Okay. I'll get it from you. Thanks. So am I trying to manipulate? I see people who will diss manipulation like this from an influence or a sales aspect. And then what I see them do with their kids is sometimes criminal. I mean, they're hiding the vegetables in some other thing to get them down. And so I'm interested in that even as we look at, because on one hand, I think we could make the argument, no, good, healthy influence, interpersonal influence like you're talking about is not manipulation. But then I'm thinking, is that so bad if it is for that person's good?
It's really important that each of us decide what manipulation means to us.
Okay.
And I very much believe that we are served with a definition that's closer to yours than some definition like, well, actually, maybe you're saying you're calling it manipulation, but you're fine with that. And I guess to clarify, what I would say is what you're doing is not manipulation. Because my definition of manipulation is that you're doing something to influence the other person without their knowledge and without regard for their well-being.
Okay.
So that's why with your kids, you're trying to help them eat vegetables, but you care about your kids. So it's not manipulating them to try to help them do something that you think is good. The danger is when we think that anything we're trying to do to influence someone that they don't know about is manipulation. What happens is most influence is then off the table for us. So we have to play small because we're not ever going to do something like we're studying and learning about influence. And we have all of these tools and insights available at our disposal, but it's just because other people don't know those things yet that they might not know. Like, let's say as an example, I could try to influence you to make a decision by giving you two options instead of just saying, here's one, do you want it or not? And if I say, here's one, do you want it or not? You're inclined to say not. And if I'm saying instead, here are two choices, which one do you prefer? You're inclined to choose one.
Right.
I know that I'm influencing you, and you may not know that you're being influenced by the way that I've set up the decision. But the reality is that you were going to be influenced by the way I set up the decision, whether I knew what I was doing or not. So if I just said, hey, here's this one thing, do you want it or not? I'm influencing you to say not.
Yeah.
So to me, it's important that we realize we have an influence on people all around us all the time. It's just a matter of, for some of us, we're influencing people more mindfully and intentionally. And for the rest of us, we're influencing people by accident. So I want to help people influence intentionally and with good goals and with the other person's well-being in mind, rather than us going around accidentally influencing, and then we leave real power in the hands of the power-hungry people who study and practice influence intentionally.
Well said. And this isn't, my focus is not parenting necessarily, but when you say that, I'm reminded of being told that it was probably some parenting expert I had on the show at some point, but they said, in essence, to influence, that it is my responsibility and opportunity to influence my kids. If I don't, someone else will. They will be influenced. That was very convicting to me in my role as a parent. But I could say the same thing as an employer, as a coworker, that people are going to be influenced. We have the opportunity to influence them for those things that we find, I'm going to say, as life-giving as opposed to life-taking. And yeah, parenting is an acute place, but in any place we have that opportunity. And I think everybody listening to the show, that's why they're listening. They want the opportunity to influence people for that person's betterment.
Yeah. And parenting isn't my main thing either, but because we're talking about it, so few people on earth know that reading parenting books is one of the best things you can do to become a better leader. There are many psychologists working on developmental psychology and teaching people how to influence their kids. And we have all these books because kids are so hard to influence. Yeah. But everything that they're teaching about influencing children, almost all of this is relevant for adults. We're the same people. And if anybody wants one book on parenting, my very, very favorite book is called Playful Parenting. And it's a beautiful way to be influencing kids, but also anyone else through warmth and humor and showering them with love.
It is a pretty profound litmus test. I have amazing kids. I have amazing teenagers. I am aware that my efforts to influence, that's put me to the test a little bit more with them. I've got two teenage boys right now, 16 and 17. And I refer to them, their BS meter is so acute that it really has caused me to come down to things and go, look, we've got to really talk about this. And they can shoot holes in my perspectives and my own propaganda, with them. And it's been interesting and to look at how do I influence them? And they're so indicative of the culture. And to some degree, when you're talking about that, I'm not technically a kid, but I often do. And I'm trying to figure out how to manipulate myself, which we'll talk about in the habits show, too. But that is, in essence, we'll speak to that. I remember having Robin Sharma on the show, and we talked about relationships, and I asked him about some of his relational guidance for people. And he said, well, number one, my first relationship that I'm concerned about is myself. What is my relationship with myself? That's going to guide all the other relationships. So here we are talking about how to influence other people. Talk to me about that. The first part, we're products of ourselves too. And we're going to get up in the morning and we're going to influence ourselves the directions that we want ourselves to go or not. We got a big job cut out for us looking in the mirror.
Yeah. And I believe that one of the most important things we can do to better influence other people with respect to ourselves is to have more patience, tolerance, and empathy for us as flawed, well-intentioned human beings. And if we can shine that gentle, warm light on ourselves, and we can forgive ourselves for all the ways in which we suck. then we can forgive other people for all the ways in which they suck. And this frame of mind and this way of relating to ourselves and other people is highly influential. It's not at all what most people are trying to do on self-help programs and things like that. But forgiveness and tolerance first for yourself gives you forgiveness and tolerance for other people, and then they let you in to influence them.
Well, let's hit on that then. I mean, we're talking about, again, the ability to influence people. And as I talked about at the beginning of the show, my son talking about him seeing the fruition of that, of having influence with people, of being other focused. And your line that I pulled out, Zoe, that is to me worth the price of admission for the show is you attract others' attention by giving them yours. I mean, it's so elementary. And yet, that corporate America right now is, to some degrees, it feels like they're hemorrhaging because they're saying people do not, especially the younger, not to pick on the younger, but just these newer workforces, they don't have these interpersonal skills, the soft skills that, I don't like that term. Somebody recently said the necessary skills, and I agree, but they don't have these interrelational skills of knowing something like that we need to be others focused, even if it's a tactic, even if it is manipulation. It's still the best way. It's the most profitable, even the right thing to do, but the most profitable. And that's not one that we're being taught. Where are we being taught is be the question, I guess.
Where are we being taught?
Yeah. Where do we get this outside of your book? I mean, this is not something that's in our average curriculum, is how to be influential with people, how to even be liked and attracted to other people.
Yeah, it's crazy that we don't teach classes like this in high school, definitely in college. When I created the course that I teach at Yale School of Management, it's called Mastering Influence and Persuasion. And it was sold out, standing room only from the very first day.
I love that testimony. Yeah.
And now it's the most popular class at the school. And we have a relatively small business school, but 600 people applied for this one class last time I taught it. And that's before the book. So when we are wanting to have more influence, we have all of these countervailing forces where almost all of us are both wishing that we would have more of the outcomes, but not wanting to do whatever it takes to get there. Okay. And most of us don't realize that the whatever it takes to get there is a lot of personal development and interpersonal skills and things like that. In business schools, we teach more of this stuff than in many other places, although there's no class like mine. And I created it to be the class I would have wanted as an MBA student. But I have a daughter who's 13 and going into high school, and she's been really lucky to be in schools that focused a lot on social and emotional development at the same time as academic development. But most kids don't get to have this. At my daughter's elementary school, one little example, and I love this school, it's called Cold Spring. It's a little hippie school in New Haven, Connecticut. As soon as you start the school, maybe, I don't remember preschool, but definitely kindergarten, every single student is up in front of a whole room of kids and adults at least twice during the year, where you practice public speaking in these weekly community meetings. And this is including 5-year-olds getting up and speaking. And if you can't read yet, there's a teacher whispering into your mouth the words to say. You're holding a microphone. If you can read, they give you a script, and there's a poster board where they've taped on it the thing for you to read, so that you don't have to try to remember what it is that you're going to say. And you're just getting practice again and again and again. Each year doing public speaking, it's like mini Toastmasters. And then these kids, by the time they graduate from 6th grade, they're 12 years old, but they're comfortable speaking in front of a room of adults.
That's profound. I'll send my kids there. That's well, it brings me to this concept. Now, you use the word charisma. And I was thinking, before I came to that chapter in your book, I was thinking of charming. We often look at people and say, oh, so-and-so is just so charming. They're, an extrovert. And of course, we have all the labels that we give on that. They're charismatic. And you said that's such a popular term. And we look at kids especially, and I wonder if that's where we get the skewed perception, or I think it is. I'll look for your validation on that, or if I'm on track. We tend to look at kids especially and go, oh, little Johnny, little Betty is so charming and charismatic, and all the kids follow them, as if it is this birthright that they got that other kids don't, like getting red hair, green eyes, or something like that, as opposed to looking at it, flipping it, kind of like what you said, and saying, well, maybe they just by nature or by some exposure, they figured out how to do the things that are charming and are charismatic, which still brings it back to a math aspect of 1 + 1 = 2. If you will do these things, which is what I feel like your book is showing us, we can all be charismatic. I guess maybe it won't be as comfortable for everybody. That is got to be fair.
We can all be far more charismatic than we already are.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be a rock star, but there are so many even rock stars who started out really shy. And I relate to anyone who started out shy or still is, because I was so shy as a child. And I was such a nerd that my theory was that my voice was the same frequency as the ambient sounds of the universe. And that's why nobody heard me and people would speak over me when I talked. And I got interested in connecting with people and trying to be heard through doing theater. And I've been interested in performing and then being a director and a teacher, where I've coached people also in public speaking. And one of my favorite stories is the story of Prince. And I was a huge fan of Prince. So sad when he died. One of the most incredible concerts I've ever been to was a very small concert with Prince in Las Vegas at a studio that he owned, Club 2121. And this was just, I can't express in words how much anticipation was there for me and all these other people in the room and the audience with me while we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And they just drew out the anticipation where they let us in, but we had to wait for 2 hours for Prince to come on stage. And we're just getting more and more excited. And it's also hot, all of these people, and there's lights and there's music, and they're building this, like, it's like at a Tony Robbins event, if you've ever been to one. Okay. So that level of just extreme excitement, craziness. Prince walks on the stage and he looks directly into my eyes. And the first line of his first song is something like, "Are we alone?" And I turn to my friend Eldar next to me and I say, "Oh my God, I'm going to faint." And then in that moment, woman next to me on the other side, total stranger, drops to the ground in a dead faint, lost consciousness, because Prince's charisma was so powerful that it overpowered her and me. But this guy didn't start out that way at all. And he started out as being so quiet and so shy that when Warner Brothers first signed him, he was that talented of a musician, but they came to a show and they said later that in this show, he was just quietly, slowly rotating till he faced the back of the stage. And anytime he had to speak to the audience, he didn't speak above a whisper, because he was just so shy. And so Warner Brothers said, "Listen, you can produce an album in the studio, but you will never go on tour." And it wasn't until Rick James invited Prince to be his warm-up opening act when Rick James was on his Super Freak tour. And Prince at that time had a #1 hit, "I Want to Be Your Lover," top of the Billboard charts. But he had to be the warm-up act for Rick James. And Prince, who had studied so carefully and practiced so many hours a day to learn his multiple instruments, he was practicing and studying charisma and stagecraft. And he was observing, what does Rick James do? And he learned how to do those things. And soon after, Prince masters it, and Rick James is telling people that he's jealous.
I love the analogy. I mean, you're saying it is constructed in essence. I mean, this is the age-old story about Zig Ziglar himself. One of the people, they said he was the master of the stage, to use your words, like no other in his amongst his peers. He must have been a natural. And of course, that's not the story. The guy was a bigger student than anyone, and he learned how to do that kind of. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Oh my gosh! Well, of course, his son Tom, who's such a dear friend of mine, I mean, he witnessed it, his dad recited this stuff over and over and over. And interestingly, I was with Zig not too long before he passed away, and he had an accident, had some impairment, and these things that he had just drilled into his head. That's what came out in as he was more inhibited. That's what came out in his talks about, marriage and character and morals and the stuff he taught on stage. It was so ingrained in his head because he had just, like you said, like Prince, he had meticulously trained himself and taught himself to the point that he gets on stage and everybody thinks, oh, he's a natural. It's the furthest thing from it. So I love your analogy of this is a learned thing. That's the good news for all of us, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. And the good thing for anyone who, like me, has really sucked at it is that as we practice it, develop it, we learn what it takes, and then we're able to coach other people. So the best coaches are people for whom this did not come naturally.
Well, and I'm thinking, I like the fact that you are teaching this class and you're up front as the teacher. I'm thinking, if I'm up front teaching a clown class, I better be a pretty good clown. I better be able to pull this off. They don't want just some grumpy dude over here teaching them the mechanics. They want somebody who can exemplify that. It must have been quite a journey, even from you coming to understand this arena, to stand up front of the class. And talk about a stage. You've got to have been, that's some big accountability. How's that?
It really is. And I actually had a huge transformation from when I first started teaching the class. And I felt that burden of trying to be and trying to show people that I belong here, that I know about influence, that I have the charisma that they're looking for. And I was treating my class like a classroom, like a stage, and me as the star. But that actually is kind of a crappy way to teach people in a workshop environment. And I don't mean someone like Zig Ziglar, who's up on stage in front of thousands of people, or Tony Robbins. You come in, charisma blazing. It's not a workshop. It's not a conversation. You need to shine. And that's what I do in a keynote kind of situation too. But in a classroom, you really want to build camaraderie and intimacy and community. And so being the star is counterproductive to that. And Danny Meyer, the restaurateur, came and spoke at Yale School of Management a few years ago. And he had the perspective that everyone is in the hospitality business.
Okay. And
when he said to all of us in the room, you're all in the hospitality business, I thought he meant the MBA students going into consulting or banking or whatever they're doing. And I was thinking of serving customers and, okay, maybe that makes sense. And it took a little while for me to internalize what this would be like if, for me as a teacher, I took on the frame of I'm in the hospitality business, and I radically changed how I teach. And I am so much better now. And I hadn't realized I had these extreme standards for students, for TAs who worked for me. Like, you definitely can't be late. I wanted to bar the door. And if I were allowed to, and the fire code didn't prevent it, I would have barred the door so nobody can come in late. But I was actually asking TAs, this is so embarrassing. I was asking TAs when someone would come in late to go and quietly shame them, to just whisper into their ear something like, the class starts at whatever time. Are you going to be able to make it on time next time, or something like that? And I had essentially punishments for people not coming to class. And if you miss, it's okay to miss one session, but if you miss another one, your grade gets docked for every session that you miss. And all of these assignments and just all this complication where there were moving parts. I needed everything to be perfect so that I could shine on stage. And then I run out immediately after to take care of the rest of my life. But now with the TAs, we all show up early, and we are hosting people, inviting them, happy for them to come. We learn everyone's name as quickly as we can. And then we're going and making small talk with people. I play music before class. And when I'm teaching the class, my perspective is not that you need to perform and I'm going to judge you, or I need to perform and we're all going to judge me. But I'm creating an opportunity for learning to happen. I can't control your experience, but I can offer you a situation where there can be learning and transformation. And then you're in charge of your experience. I don't take attendance anymore at all. 95% of people show up on any given day. Many of them never miss a class. After the class, I hang out and just have informal conversations with whoever wants to stick around. And I'm just happy for them to be there. And the students fundamentally can't do anything wrong. They have to get a grade, right? But I'm not going to judge them for almost anything. There's almost nothing they could do to have me judge them. It's like a guest shows up at your house and they break a glass or they spill wine, right? Or they come late. It's really okay, right? You're not mad at them. They're your guest. And if they're not having fun, that's too bad, but you did whatever you could for them to try to have fun. It's not your responsibility.
It feels like we're round circle to where we started on the perspective here of self-focus or other focus. So you just shared your own journey. So what happened? What did you see transpire in your own influence? Because at the end of the day, I'm looking at what does influence get me? And this is what I was talking with my son about this morning. What does it get you? It ultimately gains you trust, which I feel like we're in the era where I don't know of a greater, more valuable asset. I don't have one personally. I mean, it's what I rely on. I mean, I'm a professional podcast host. If people don't trust me, they won't listen to me, and we won't have our advertisers, and we don't get paid. I mean, so you made this shift. I would think your influence increased, your trust increased, and therefore the byproduct of that was your students had greater success. Is that a fair trajectory?
Yeah. And honestly, Kevin, I would say influence gets you everything, or at least just about everything short of spiritual enlightenment. And I don't mean that when you become influential, suddenly all of your wishes come true and, God is just showering abundance on your head and on your doorstep, but that almost anything that you want, almost anything, you have to influence other people or you have to influence yourself. And often it's both.
Okay. On this aspect, you also talked about, and I pulled it out, that we tend to think of, and it influences how we look at influence. We tend to think, and we know this, I think most people have heard this, we think that we make decisions logically. And you said, of course, the science proves otherwise, that we generally do things emotionally, not logically. And you use the words of that we think we use reason, that we think we use our rationale. So that's what we think that we do. And so we could tend to go about influence that way, as opposed to realizing, no, this is an emotional thing. We are influenced emotionally, so are other people. So we're talking about influencing them and relating to their emotions, which I guess that's what, I'm talking myself back in that circle of it by proxy does make us, if we're going to have, we have to be other focused. We've got to be, because we're talking about their emotions. We've got to be in tune, which takes, if I take the focus off me, I've got to have some level of self-confidence. If I'm going to put the focus on them, I've got to have some social awareness. Is that a true path?
Absolutely. If someone's going to be open to your influence, they need to feel that you care about them in some way, right? Yeah. And it's interesting that you connect shifting the focus off of yourself and self-confidence, because a lot of people think of that person who's trying to be the center of attention as the self-confident person, but that person is often the insecure person, and the person who can sit back and listen and ask questions and observe and let you share your ideas first is the more confident person. And an exemplar of this would be the Dalai Lama, who sometimes comes up when I say, when you think of a charismatic person, lots of times it's Bill Clinton or Obama, sometimes Hitler, but the Dalai Lama as well. And he's so quiet, right? But there are many people who are so quiet and they're so present that our attention focuses like a laser on that person. We want to hear everything they have to say.
I was just given tickets by a friend to go and invited to go with him to go see Jordan Peterson. So 2 nights ago, I went downtown Colorado Springs and we went into the big auditorium, 1,800 people, got up there. It's supposed to start at 7 and it doesn't, and goes on to 7:10, 7:20. And they're building some anticipation, as you said, with Prince. And then, of course, he comes on stage. I don't know that I would, it's hard for me to label him as charismatic in the way that we think about that, because he is fairly soft-spoken. He's fairly slowly spoken, but that seems to be his frame of charisma, is that being very present, being very thoughtful, taking the question, having a pause. These are all things that I struggle with because I tend to just be rapid fire. But it was very engaging. And now whether that was him naturally, whether he learned and adopted that aspect of, charisma, either way, it was, to me, I've been to enough of these things to see there's some construction that took place here. And I kind of am liking that word, that influence. We can all, don't have to be a natural, don't have to be super outgoing. We can construct it. We can all be, as you said, we can all be more influential. But I guess it opens the door there to say if we were to take that charisma, you could chop it up. I guess that's what you're saying. You can chop that up into a pie. There are so many different ways to come at it that probably are in your comfort zone.
Actually, I think there are only 2 ways to come at it.
Okay.
But there are different ways that these manifest.
Okay.
And it's 2 at the same time. I've asked hundreds and hundreds of people to name a charismatic person, and then they describe 3 traits that person has. So let's just say, Jordan Peterson for you is a charismatic person, right? And 3 things about Jordan Peterson. You said that he's thoughtful, right? Was that one? And he pauses.
Yeah.
And so I guess, and soft-spoken, but I don't know if those were the things that you were saying made him charismatic, or those were things that you were surprised he could have and still be charismatic.
No, I think it did make him. It was engaging. It was part of the construction, and it was very different from the charisma of Gary Vaynerchuk. A lot of people, know him, and he's going to be, not that he's not those things, but his construction up on stage, dramatically different. Those are great juxtapositions, because Jordan's there in his 2000 plus whatever suit, very, well trimmed and cut, very thoughtful, very, I would say kind of soft spoken in essence, and even slow spoken. And Gary Vaynerchuk, of course, is like a cartoon character, just going at it, both with big audiences. To me, it opens the door for different aspects of it. Charisma is not just one thing, which I'm afraid people get caught in.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think that having a big audience means that they're necessarily charismatic. There are all kinds of people in leadership roles and who have a big following who are not so charismatic. But these 2 people who for you are charismatic, and for lots of other people are charismatic, they're a great example of very different types of people who still have these 2 main building block traits that if you name a charismatic person and write down traits, and this is over hundreds of people, 85% of those traits fall into 2 buckets, which are confidence and connection.
Wow.
They can look different, but every charismatic person displays confidence and they know how to connect. The confidence part can sound loud and booming, like, say, Tony Robbins. It can sound quiet and thoughtful, like, say, Jordan Peterson. And it can sound like crazy, like Gary V. And Gary V is not just loud and fast, but he doesn't care what anybody thinks. Yeah. Right. And so this is another element of what confidence can look like. And the connection part of it is connecting with the people in their audience. So not everybody likes Jordan Peterson. Not everybody likes Gary V.
Right.
But they are connecting with the people in their audience. And those people are feeling seen and feeling heard. And what Jordan Peterson does when he pauses is one just so simple way to connect with people, because it gets hard to follow the mental trajectory that, like, if someone's on a fast moving train, like, I actually can't listen to Gary Vee. I have never listened to a complete talk because I just, my mind starts to short circuit. But when you give a pause, then everybody's attention catches up to you. Yeah. So this is one way of connecting, and we can connect through hate as well as through empathy. Like Hitler is an example of someone who connected very well and very deeply with his own audience, but through a united hatred and fear of other people.
Well, it almost causes me to come up with another analogy or another person as well, because we're talking about using Jordan and Gary Vee. Both are honestly in the culture almost in a divisive category. So I'm trying to think of somebody else, because we don't want to associate, you don't have to be divisive and conflicting and volatile even to be charismatic. Brene Brown, I've been looking at her new book recently, and she's one. I don't think she would be put in the divisive category. She's
she's a great example.
Very gracious and very comfortably, but I would call her charismatic. And I do hear you saying there's a lot of people on stage with a big audience and they have celebrity power. They're not very charismatic, but for whatever reason, people are going to follow them. But I would put her in there, and boy, she's comfortable.
Yeah, she connects very well, and she shows a completely different type of confidence, which is fascinating to me, which is being confidently vulnerable. So she tells you all of her shortcomings. She's just completely open about it. And it's not just that we connect with some of those things, but actually you have to be very confident to be able to do that on stage. And we feel that power from her.
Well, then I want to ask you about that, Zoe. I mean, because if people are hearing that, so to be charismatic, to have influence, I need to have confidence, but we just showcase it can come across in very different ways. And we all want to do it in a way that is authentic to us, but what does that look like? Because you're saying, using the self-focus, for instance, is not an indicator of confidence. It kind of goes back to your statement. You attract others' attention by giving them yours. And to me, I feel like that is an aspect of confidence. It's very hard to step back, to be in a social situation and to be others focused and not draw attention to self. I mean, I learned that. So it was a constructed, educated learning that I got from my parents and Zig Ziglar and How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I learned that. I'm so grateful. But that took, actually, initially, maybe if it wasn't competence, it at least took training. Construction, I guess, is back to your word.
Yeah. And on stage, it's hard to be giving attention to other people if we're not practiced at it, because we're very self-conscious and we're absolutely terrified standing in front of a room, almost all of us. And this includes me, even though I do professional speaking. I get scared every time I'm going to be in front of a bigger audience than I've ever been in, or lots of different reasons. I still get scared. But if your intention before you go on, and then subconsciously you're coming back to this, is other focused, where what you want to do is you want to be helpful, right? It's not about how can I persuade them to do the thing that I want them to do, but how can I be helpful? And even for me, one of my goals and practices being up on stage is just loving those people. And I'm actively actually loving those people. That's my style. And it's not Gary Vee's style, right? So you don't have to be standing up on stage loving people, but to figure out how to connect with them. And when you're able to take your focus off of yourself, you are by definition less self-conscious. And so you're more confident in that. But you can also just practice in conversations with people, not on stage. It's much easier. Practice talking less, listening more, asking more questions. So let's say if I'm on a stage giving a talk, my goal is, how can I be helpful? But my goal listening to a talk, or my goal in a conversation with someone, might be, what can I learn? So just being curiously inquisitive, what could I learn that might be helpful for me, or interesting, or helpful for somebody else? And bringing back Dale Carnegie again, something that he coached people to do is use people's names. So a lot of us have been doing that. And he said a person's name is the most beautiful sound in the universe. And research since Dale Carnegie died has found that people's names actually activate a unique pattern in their brain that's a self-relevant It's a self-relevant activation pattern that we only see when we hear our own names and if we're in a partnership with also the name of a romantic partner. And you know that something unique is going on because your name can wake you up from sleep. And you can hear your name in a crowded room of people talking where you don't hear anything else that's going on. But then somebody says, Kevin, and you're like, whoa. So Dale Carnegie was right about a lot of interesting things.
He just didn't know why. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Zoe, yes. On confidence, you mentioned in talking about confidence, you said the word 2 or 3 times, connection. Yeah. As the overlay. You said the 2 things in the bucket, 85% of the time that fall in there. So in that same question as I did with confidence, how does that connection, how do you see that happening generally within this topic of influence? Because, well, I mean, I know you say we attract others' attention, I keep repeating it, by giving them yours, but how to do that well? We've all seen that done poorly. We've all seen it done, and it felt manipulatively.
Yeah.
How do we what are some of the top ways in regards to influence that we can increase people's feeling of connection with us, which is ultimately what we're doing?
When we are trying to influence somebody, one of the best things that we can do is be influenceable. So if you walk into a conversation with someone where you're just pushing your agenda, it's very unlikely that you're going to make headway. Or if you manage to push them into saying yes now, they will regret it later and they will want to get out of it. But being actually deeply open-minded and interested in what the other person has to say and curious, most people are really good at connecting. It's not that we don't know how to connect. It's just that we forget to do it. And then it's easy to just talk too much. So if we can shut up a little bit, that's very helpful too.
Which is, again, you can go, I remember as a young man being taught some of this and going into social situations now, just being aware and just watching the conversation happen and see the consummate, one person tells a story. If they're not interrupted, you can see the other person that's just chomping at the bit to get in and tell their part of the story, and to see it go back and forth, and they're not repeating each other's names. They're not, well, and it was those sweet words back to that, like your name, that sweet word. The response that I was given was somebody says their whatever, tells their story, says their thing. And the next sweetest response, maybe after their name, was to say, man, that's really interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Yeah. Count how many times that happens in a social. Yeah.
Follow-up questions are so important. And researchers at Harvard have done some experiments looking at this and finding out, for example, in a dating context, they'll do speed dates and then see who are more successfully getting invitations for a second date afterward. Wow. And it's people want to have a second date with someone who asks them not just questions, but follow-up questions.
Follow-up. I mean, that's so simple. And yet I would challenge everybody who's listening, go into your next social situation, whether it's the dinner table or a work group or the water cooler chat or the bar, wherever you are, and listen to it go along and see how many times does that happen that somebody just to say, man, that's interesting. That right there to me is validating for me to say something and for it to just be considered for a millisecond.
Yeah.
It's got to be one of the most rare things, and it's probably worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
One of the pieces that you brought up in the book that to me was somewhat troubling, honestly. I recognize it, but I'm grateful that you brought it up in the book, that we can seek to influence somebody. So here we are back to where we were talking a minute ago, where we have something we know, we really altruistically, we want to help person X. We know that we can. We hear what's going on, we see what's going on, and know that we have some value to offer. And so let's say we get the opportunity, we follow some of these things, and we get a response back from them, and we actually influence them. We changed their mind. And of course, then what you showcase is we can so often do that, and we didn't change your behavior. That's troubling. Tell me more.
It is troubling. It's so frustrating, right? There's a vast abyss between intentions and behavior, and including for us, right? Like, do you make New Year's resolutions?
I'm making resolutions every week and trying. Yeah, I'm way too far on that spectrum. Yeah, so yes.
So I'm amazed that 30% of people actually follow through on their New Year's resolutions. Do you have a resolution right now?
A resolution right now. What am I working on? Right now, my resolution from a personal development standpoint is I'm literally reading Brene Brown's latest book, Atlas of the Heart, which I just got the bestseller list from my literary agents, and the thing's selling 10,000 copies last week alone. And I'm reading that and striving to learn. Literally, her book is it's what's been prescribed to me, to learn about emotions and to learn about my own. So right now it's devoting literally the time and the attention and the study. And I'm not just reading it to read it, but to study and then to take my own emotions daily in whatever given moment. And as my counselor says, not just even be aware of them, but not to distract myself, medicate, whatever, sit in them and feel them. So there's how's that for a candid resolution? That's a big one.
That's right amazing.
Yeah.
And beautiful.
Thank you.
And how is it going?
My awareness is better. I'm more right now I'm going to say I'm at if this is 12 steps, I'm at 3 maybe. And it's the awareness of this is one of those moments that I should sit in and I don't want to. And often I'm still not. I'm still going to go for a run. I'm going to put some music on or whatnot, because this is like a therapy session, Zoe, because my capacity to do that is so atrophied. I'm having to grow a new muscle. How's that? So it's progress. I'll claim progress. Feels a ways off from success.
And it sounds like you're doing it perfectly.
Why?
Because the biggest way that people fail in their resolutions and the things we want to change in our behavior is that we are reaching too far and we're not giving ourselves credit for baby steps.
Okay.
So like a baby step is that you're reading this book, right? It's a lot of time to read a book. But like you read a chapter of a book and this is you telling yourself, I'm following through on this thing that I care about of developing my deeper emotions and my emotional intelligence. And then you are sometimes sitting in the emotion that you don't want to feel, right? And oh my God, everyone, like 98% of the people listening would love to have the procrastination tactic of go for a run. How great would that be, right? You don't want to do the thing.
Now you can relate though. I listened to your TED talk and you know that. So your walking is my running and mountain biking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I know it is a distraction tactic, but you're literally doing exactly the thing because you're making baby steps of progress. And that's what we don't tend to give ourselves credit for and what we don't tend to give other people credit for. But positive reinforcement is just all about recognizing baby steps and being on this path. So you sound like someone who's rocking the resolutions.
Thank you for the positive reinforcement, Zoe. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that came up. It's highly relevant. And right along with this, again, one of the things the reasons you're on the show is because it stood out to me is the ask, which is not the power of asking. I had Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Hansen on the show maybe last year, and their book is something to that title, The Power of Asking or something like that. But I didn't take it in this context. And when we're on this topic, I mentioned a minute ago of influence, we can have influence, we can get the opportunity, we can, I was going to say act it out. That's a weird way of saying it, but we can have influence with somebody. It takes root to some degree. We change their mind, but we didn't change their behavior. And we talked before about our propensity to just want to reject doing anything. We want to go with, as you say, ease over the effort. We don't want to make the effort. And then you come along with, it's actually chapter 3.5, which I really like that. I may give that to my literary agents because I've had a couple of chapters. It's not really a whole chapter. So I like your 3.5. Thanks for introducing me to that. And it's ask. And it's in regards to, really to me, it was going to bat against those couple things that we just talked about. And people don't want to make the effort, but it's so hard to say no. I guess it's you hit my personal bias. If you ask me, I mean, that's part of it. We can get a more therapy. I'm a yes man. I'm a people pleaser. I don't like conflict. And so my go-to for myself, for my own medication and my own self-image is yes, I'll do it. I'm Superman. It's easy to jump into the God complex and I'll do that. And so if you ask me, and yet it's amazing how we don't do that. And in reading your writing about it, I felt like, are we in a culture that maybe is growing? I feel like we are growing more passive. We don't want to do the big ask. That's so vulnerable. And we'd rather just put it out there and have somebody do it. And you did the study on that and realized that over and over, people just don't ask. And the power of it, I guess that's what you gave to me, Zoe, is it so powerful? And it kind of made me question myself. Am I doing that enough? Or am I just kind of giving a passive aggressive aspect at it?
So when you say you're a people pleaser, what I find is 90% of us are people pleasers. Fewer than that realize that we're people pleasers. And a lot of people don't know that they're people pleasers until they do something like the no challenge that I'll give people to do 24 hours of no, where you say no. And so I totally challenge you to do this as well, Kevin, if you're up for it.
Okay.
But 24 hours of no to every single person who asks you for something or makes an invitation. And this doesn't mean like kids, family, we're spending a lot of time with them, say it's a weekend day. You don't have to say no to your 17-year-old son 19 times in 24 hours, but saying no to each person at least once the first time they come to you so that you experience what it feels like to say no and you experience their reaction to you saying no. So for anyone else who wants to do the challenge, I encourage you to, but of course you can say no. You don't ruin your life.
Yeah.
So, like your dream comes true, right? Like your agent is like, oh, we have the best book deal for you. And they'll be like, yeah, no, never mind.
Right.
And everyone has the right to change their mind always. And that includes you. So if you've said no to something that then you want to change your mind and go back and say yes, the other person will be so happy. And generally just practicing saying no with warmth and even with a sense of humor is the practice that helps us get over this fear that a lot of us don't even know that we have, that you just shared. We're people pleasers. We don't want to say no. We don't want to alienate other people, but saying no doesn't have to alienate them at all. And in some cases, it can actually even bring us closer. But in many cases, what it helps us do is make that transformation that you're talking about from being someone that many of us are just passively doing nice things, passively doing good. When someone comes and asks us for a favor, we say yes, rather than doing the big, great things that we might dream of and aspire to, not just because we didn't ask, but because we are so tapped out and busy and exhausted from saying yes to everyone else's asks.
I feel like you've been talking to my therapist. My other book is one on boundaries by Nedra Glover Tawwab, and that you just hit it. It's I'm learning again. I'm aware. I'm getting a little bit better. That one I'm probably getting a little bit better, but it's not comfortable at all. Saying no is not. It still feels so bad. It honestly does. But I'm learning. But to your point here, asking, whether that's asking for help, asking for the sale, asking for the date, asking for the whatever, even, asking, well, I like what you said. I did it today. Gosh, so I did it today with another son. And I used your thing of, okay, I want to influence you to do this. So I'm going to ask you, how can I influence you to spend some time? I actually wanted him to go outside, play in the snow, get out of the house, And so I did that. How can I influence you? And I said a couple of things. He says, you can't bribe me. I said, yes, I can. It's for your good. I don't get points here. This is for you. So I'm absolutely bribery, manipulation, whatever. So I'm playing this out. But we're back to that point.
So what did he say? Did he tell you how to influence him or what he needs for a bribe?
He actually was, I'm going to use the word moved. He was moved enough by my effort to do that and to ask him that he said, I'll just do it anyways. I don't have to bribe. Because the funny thing in my house is that I perpetuate is, look, dude, I'll give you $100 to do X, Y, Z. And he responded initially, said, no, you won't. I said, well, what would it take? Seriously, to give me a number, or I'm going out. What do you want? I'll give you something to eat, and just the conversation was enough for him to hear me, hear my heart. And again, he knows it's to have him do something. I'm not getting points somewhere that I know of for getting him to go outside and get some vitamin D, or today it would be some snow, but
yeah. And that's exactly what we were talking about being influenceable.
Yeah.
Right? That you approach him with an open mind and an open heart. And then he's willing to let you influence him because you're willing to let him influence you.
Well, and it brings me around really the anchor of your message for me is it's one of those messages, one of my favorite kind, where it is a win-win proposition, that it is not just the, quote, right thing to do, the nice thing to do, to be interested in this other person. It is the most profitable. And so as everybody who's listening to the show, who's a coach or consultant or business owner, and they're looking for the next, sale, the next investor, the next person that they can help, if they don't have the superpower of influence, as your book says, they don't have much. And you're saying it can be constructed. So thank you for doing what you do, for having researched this and doing the work to bring it forward. In this book that I'll be shamelessly trying to get everybody to go buy. Zoe, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks for joining me in this conversation, joining us, myself, and Zoe Chance. That's who we just had this discussion with. The book is Influence Is Your Superpower, The Science of Winning Hearts, Sparking Change, and Making Good Things Happen. You can find that anywhere, and you can connect with Zoe at zoechance.com. Till next time, here is to the evolving you.
Yeah.